Let's begin. The fire crackled softly, its orange glow barely pushing back the suffocating darkness of the dense forest. The only sounds were the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind and the occasional snap of a twig in the underbrush. I sat alone, staring into the flames, trying to shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The camping trip had been a last-minute idea. Just me and my camera, hoping for some peace away from the chaos of the city. I had picked a remote spot deep in the woods, far from any trails or other campers. It was supposed to be relaxing, rejuvenating even, but the unease had set in almost immediately after I arrived. It started small, a faint whispering just beyond the reach of the firelight. At first, I thought it was the wind, but no breeze was strong enough to make such a sound. Then came the shadows. They danced just outside my vision, fleeting and ungraspable, but they were there. I felt them watching. I shook my head, trying to dismiss my growing paranoia. It was late, and I hadn't slept much the night before. That had to be it, just my mind playing tricks on me. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The first real sign that something was wrong came around midnight. I was adjusting my camera, trying to capture some footage of the stars, when I noticed a faint light in the distance. It wasn't the steady glow of a lantern or flashlight. It flickered, pulsing unnaturally, like a flame that couldn't decide whether to exist or fade away. Curiosity got the better of me. Grabbing my flashlight, I ventured into the darkness, my camera strapped tightly to my chest. The light was farther than I'd thought, and the more I walked, the more the forest seemed to close in around me. The trees loomed impossibly tall, their branches twisting together like skeletal hands trying to trap me. The light disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, leaving me standing in the middle of the woods with only my flashlight to guide me. That's when I heard it. A low, guttural moan, unlike any animal I'd ever encountered. It seemed to vibrate through the ground, shaking me to my core. I turned back, trying to retrace my steps, but the forest looked different. Every tree seemed unfamiliar, every path twisted and wrong. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that I was lost. The moaning grew louder, accompanied by a soft scraping sound, like claws dragging against bark. Then I saw it. A figure, barely visible through the trees. It moved unnaturally, its limbs jerking and twisting in ways that shouldn't have been possible. My flashlight flickered, its beam cutting in and out, and for a moment, I thought I saw a face. Pale, gaunt, and utterly devoid of life. Its eyes seemed to glow faintly, like embers smoldering in the dark. I stumbled backward, tripping over a root and crashing to the ground. My camera swung wildly, capturing flashes of the figure as it approached. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline surging through my veins as I ran blindly through the forest. The branches tore at my clothes and skin, but I didn't care. All I could think about was escaping that thing. The whispers returned, louder this time, surrounding me from every direction. They weren't words I could understand, but they carried a malevolent tone that sent chills down my spine. I kept running until I saw the faint glow of my campfire in the distance. Relief washed over me as I burst into the clearing, but the relief was short-lived. My campsite wasn't how I'd left it. The tent was shredded, the fire reduced to a smoldering pile of ash. Scattered around the site were strange symbols carved into the ground, their jagged lines radiating an unnatural energy. I froze, my breath hitching as I realized I wasn't alone. Standing on the edge of the clearing was a woman. Her dress was torn and dirty, her hair matted with leaves and mud. She didn't move, didn't speak. She just stared at me with those same glowing eyes I'd seen in the forest. My camera beeped softly, signaling that it was still recording. I raised it shakily, pointing it at the woman. Through the viewfinder, her face looked even more distorted, her features stretching and twisting, as if the camera couldn't process what it was seeing. Suddenly, she let out a piercing scream, a sound that seemed to cut through the very fabric of reality. My flashlight shattered in my hand, plunging the clearing into darkness. The only light now came from the faint glow of her eyes and the symbols etched into the ground. The whispers turned into a deafening roar, and I felt something cold and clammy wrap around my ankle, pulling me toward the woman. I tried to fight, clawing at the ground, but it was no use. As I was dragged closer, the symbols begging, I woke up lying flat on the cold, hard ground, my body frozen and my mind sluggish, as though I'd been plunged into a nightmare I couldn't escape. My head throbbed violently, each pulse pounding like a relentless drumbeat inside my skull. Slowly, the faint rustling of leaves in the still night air registered in my ears, pulling me back to the grim reality I had left behind. When I opened my eyes, the scene before me was worse than I could have imagined. My campfire, which had died hours ago, was burning again, but the flames were unnatural, a pale flickering blue that moved erratically, almost as though it were alive. The woman, or whatever she was, still stood there. Her back was turned to me now, rigid and lifeless, as if she were a grotesque statue abandoned in the woods. Every now and then, her head would tilt slightly to one side, snapping back into place with an unnerving precision. The sound was faint but sharp, like the creak of an old door hinge, and it sent a shiver racing down my spine. My heart was pounding so loudly, it drowned out everything else. I wasn't alone anymore. Shadows had begun to gather around the campfire, creeping closer to the woman. They were shapeless and fluid, moving like smoke against the wind. Their lack of form didn't make them any less terrifying. Their presence was oppressive, suffocating, as though the air itself was being drained of life. Even without eyes, I could feel their gaze boring into me. I tried to move, but my body refused to respond. My arms and legs felt as though they were shackled, pinned by some unseen force. Only my eyes could move, darting wildly to take in my surroundings. The shadows began to encircle the woman, faster and faster, their fluid forms twisting unnaturally. A low, guttural hum filled the air, rising in volume until it felt like the forest itself was groaning in pain. The woman froze suddenly, her tilting ceasing altogether. Then, without warning, her head snapped backward, her body remaining perfectly still. She was looking at me now, her face a grotesque mask of horror. Her skin was cracked and dry, resembling ancient, weathered bark. Where her eyes should have been were two gaping voids, black and endless. Her mouth was stretched into an unnatural smile, her lips torn and jagged, exposing a chaotic row of sharp, uneven teeth. A heavy pressure began to constrict my chest, making it harder to breathe. The woman started to move toward me, each step accompanied by a sickening crunch, like bones breaking underfoot. I struggled harder against whatever was holding me, panic coursing through my veins. The shadows followed her, their movements eerily synchronized, their attention fixed on me now. Suddenly, my body jolted back to life, and I wasted no time. Rolling onto my side, I scrambled to my feet and bolted into the forest, not daring to look back. The trees blurred around me as I ran, branches clawing at my clothes and skin like grasping hands. My breath came in ragged gasps, and my heart pounded against my ribcage as though it might burst. Behind as if it were ready to collapse. I didn't have a choice. With every ounce of strength I had left, I sprinted toward it, crashing through the flimsy door and slamming it shut behind me. The silence inside the cabin was deafening. My chest heaved as I tried to catch my breath, leaning heavily against the door. The room was dim, lit only by weak slivers of moonlight seeping through cracks in the wooden walls. It was bare except for a rickety table, a few broken chairs, and a bookshelf sagging under the weight of rotting books. But it was the object in the far corner that caught my attention. A large, ornate mirror stood there, its frame carved with intricate, horrifying designs. Twisted faces, sharp fangs, and gnarled hands seemed to writhe in the wood. The glass was cracked, yet it reflected the room with unnerving clarity. I didn't want to look at it. Something deep inside me screamed to turn away, but my feet carried me forward, step by reluctant step. The air around the mirror felt heavy, as though the object itself was breathing. When I was close enough, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The reflection wasn't mine. The figure in the glass was wrong. Its body resembled mine, but its face was distorted, stretched into a grotesque parody of a human expression. Its eyes were empty, but its smile, oh, that smile, was the same as hers. It stared at me, unmoving, as though daring me to come closer. Behind it, in the reflection, the shadows from the campfire began to appear. They slid across the surface of the mirror like oil, moving toward the